What I've had happen a lot of times when I speak is people come up to me afterwards and they say, I had absolutely no idea. I had no idea this is how food is being produced. And they're very troubled by it.
Bringing the people behind our food to life.
I think a lot of people now are trying to get reconnected with where their food comes from. And most of us, for most of our lives, just had food put in front of us on our plate and we had no idea where food came from. It might be coming from another country, or it might be coming from across the country. And we didn't know how it was produced. Was it raised in a greenhouse? Was it raised in a factory farm? Whatever. And I think people are really interested in trying to reconnect with where their food comes from and how it was produced. And so what we're starting to see is these local food economies that are kind of beginning to bubble up again and be more like traditional food production that's closer to the source. The people that are raising it are closer to the people who are consuming it. And a lot of times farms, you have urban fringe farming of one type, and then you might have further out another type of farming, and livestock tends to be further away from cities because the land value is lower. And so there are different places where different things should be raised and can be raised. But I think we're beginning to see a real interest all over of people getting their food from a more local source.
Fundamentally, what is wrong with our present food system? Why does it need to be changed, and how significant the degree of change is required?
Well, yes, I think the degree is enormous that needs to be made, the change. The way I would describe it is it has become industrialized. We've seen, in the late 1800s, the mid to late 1800s, we saw the industrialization of production of all kinds of goods, cars, and all kinds of machinery, etc., clocks. Things that were once made individually and by hand became mechanized and became made in a factory-style production. During the course of the 20th century, that idea began to be applied to food items, to plants and animals. And I think it's especially inappropriate when you're dealing with any living creatures, especially animals, but really all food things that start out as living entities. You can't treat animals as widgets, and if you do, there are tremendous problems that come as a result of that, both environmental problems and human health problems and animal welfare problems. That's what I call the industrialization of food production, and that's what needs to change. We fundamentally need to go back to a system of food production that is based on a connectedness with the land and with humans and animals and the land. And when those things are all working together, more like an ecosystem, mimicking nature, then we're going to have a sustainable, healthy food system. The cost of food is something that comes up a lot, and I think what's really important for people to understand is that the current low cost, the cheap cost of food that we have now is actually an artificially low cost. We have all kinds of different forms of subsidies in the current system that lower the cost, and I don't advocate for totally eliminating agricultural subsidies or subsidies for food production or food consumption. But I think they should go towards a food system that is not causing all kinds of environmental damage, causing food that we have to worry about carrying, bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics and things like that. We should be producing food that is healthy to eat, healthy to produce, and is treating animals justly and fairly. The most important thing is that animals that are being raised for food need to be given a life that respects their fundamental nature. And when that is allowed, when they're able to, for example, interact with other animals of their like, and they're able to take care of their own young, they're not kept in metal crates, they're not given all kinds of drugs, they're not continually kept inside, they're allowed to be out on pasture. When they're given those opportunities, they tend to be healthy. And so what that means is the system doesn't require all kinds of drugs and other chemical inputs, and you produce healthier food, and you have a much less of a problem with any kind of pollution as well, because you have a lower concentration of the animals, but also the pollution, the manure, that's created from a farm, a traditional farm, doesn't contain all the chemicals in it. So you have a whole different system, you have a healthier system, and you're producing healthier food and you're having a healthier environment. What we do on our own ranch is we make sure that all of the animals they're not crowded. They are either living full-time outside or they have opportunity to be outside every day on pasture, not just on a cement pad or something, but on grass. And they have a lot of opportunities to exercise, breathe fresh air, and they're very, very healthy. We almost use no drugs on our ranch and no other chemicals. There are several major impediments. I don't think any of them are totally insurmountable. As I mentioned a little while ago, I think we are going to see some seismic shifts in the food system. But there's a huge amount of money in the current system, whether it's the chemical companies, the drug companies, just the big agribusiness companies. They're all very invested in the status quo. Change of the type that I'm talking about would be very problematic for those companies. So that's why I'm really an advocate of grassroots change, people making decisions about their own eating and what they're serving to themselves, what they're eating at home, what they're serving to their customers if they're chefs, what they're offering in their stores if they're retailers. And I think that's where we're going to really begin to see the shift, because it gets around that question of the political power. I think that's probably the biggest impediment. The other thing that I've encountered is that there are people that don't believe change is possible. And so a lot of what I'm always trying to do is show people that change is possible, that we got to the current system through a series of human choices. We can make other choices and change the direction. Just as we got to this point, we can get to another point through a series of human decisions. So I think when people kind of accept the possibility of change, that gets over that impediment. Well, any system that is keeping animals in total confinement in crowded conditions is something that should never have come about. And especially if the manure is being liquefied. Because when you add water to manure, the same way that we do to our toilets, it's done to move the manure around. And it's the way that dairy operations, hog operations, and a lot of egg-laying operations are done. That creates just these huge ponds and pools and all kinds of other holding tanks, etc., of liquefied manure. That's a really good environment for diseases to continue to exist in, to grow and to remain in. It's a problem as far as breaches and overflows, seepage to groundwater. There's just so many things wrong with having a huge collection of liquefied manure. So any system that has a liquefied manure system should probably be eliminated. And any system that continually confines animals and does not allow them to be outside on pasture where they belong, those are things that we should get rid of. My goal, and what I think would be the way everyone might want to think about where they should get their food from, is I'm trying to get food only from sources that I would want to visit. If I wouldn't want to go to that place, I shouldn't be eating stuff from there. And I think if everybody thinks about it in those terms and begins to learn where their food is coming from, again, we're going to see seismic change. The system is so far right now from where people envision they want their food coming from. And when people begin to learn more about it and to begin to try to get food from a place where they know where it's coming from and where they're happy with the place where it's coming from, we're going to see dramatic shift.